Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Calderdale and Kirklees Joint Health Overview and Scrutiny Committee. The first agenda item today is the appointment of Chair and Co-Chair. Can I have a nomination, please?
Can I nominate Councillor Smage and Councillor Hutchinson to continue?
Can I have somebody to second that?
I'm happy to second that.
Can I have a show of hands, please, as to whether you agree? Thank you, that's carried. So, Councillor Smage, Councillor Hutchinson.
Thank you, members of the committee. The item 2 is membership of the committee to receive apologies for absence. I think we've got Councillor Blackburrow from Calderdale sent apologies, and we are, I think, expecting Councillor Evans, but if not, then we will put that down as apologies as well. Could I ask the committee if they will please introduce themselves? So Councillor Hutchinson.
Colin Hutchinson from Calderdale, Councillor for Skirkett Ward.
Councillor Mike Barnes, also Calderdale Councillor, and for the same Skirkett Ward.
Councillor Ryler.
Jane Ryler, Kirklees Council, Home Valley South.
Jo Lawson, Kirklees Councillor for Crosslandmore and Neverton Ward.
Ashley Robinson, Kirklees Council for the Linley Ward.
And I'm Councillor Liz Smage, and I'm from the Burstle and Berkshire Ward. And
I'm Yolanda Myers, Kirklees Council. I'm the Governance Officer for today's meeting.
And I'm Libby Wiley, I'm a Scrutiny Officer for Calderdale Council.
okay. Thank you very much. Right, item 3 then, minutes of previous meeting. First of all, do we take the minutes of the previous meeting, for those who were at the meeting, do we take those as a true record of the meeting? Yeah, agreed. Thank you. Are there any points from the minutes that anybody wishes to raise at this moment in time? Or do you want to take under different items? Councillor Hutchinson, do you want to?
Just to draw attention to the resolution on the item about the Bronte Birthing Centre, that there were a number of items of information that were requested at that time. We will be, in the work plan, we will probably be reviewing the first 6 months of operation of the Bronte Birth Centre, and we would be very grateful if those specified items of information were provided in time for that review.
Thank you. Anybody else got anything under the minutes? Councillor Barnes.
Thank you, Chair. Just clarify that, are we going to pick up any items from item 7, which was the reconfiguration under the A&E update?
We can do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on then. All items. Oh, I missed one. Declaration of interests. Councillor Lawson.
If I can just let the committee know that I hold a bank contract with CHFT.
Are there any other councillors who need to declare any interests? Okay, thank you. All items are held in public today, and we have 2 deputations that we have received. Neither person, I think, can be here today. So the first one we received is from Calderdale about services at Todmorden. So I think, Libby, are you reading that one? Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. The following deputation has been submitted by the patient participation groups at Todmorden Group Practice and at Hebden Bridge Group Practice. We are asking the committee to recognise and support our request to the Calderdale and Huddersfield NHS Foundation Trust and the West Yorkshire Integrated Care Board to reinstate a minor injuries unit at Todmorden Health Centre. We have previously been told by Brendan Brown, Chief Executive of CHFT, that this would be a decision for the Calderdale Integrated Health Board. Mr Brown told us we have discussed this with them. Unfortunately, due to resource and workforce challenges, this is not a development that can be sustainably and safely supported at this time. For patients living in the upper Calder Valley, in particular those without a car, travel to both Halifax and Huddersfield hospitals is very difficult. There are no direct buses to either hospital, and for patients living beyond Todmorden, Cornwall for instance, it is impossible to get to either hospital for an early appointment by public transport. The Todmorden Health Centre is easily accessible by bus from across the valley. Properly resourcing it would reduce pressure on A&E departments at Calderdale Royal and Huddersfield Royal and would reduce health inequalities. Currently, access to emergency medical services depends on where patients live and how well off they are. For those patients lucky enough to own a car, parking at both hospitals is often not possible because the car parks are full. There is plenty of parking spaces close to Todmorden Health Centre. Many disabled people in Todmorden, Hebden Bridge, Mythenroyd and the Hilltop areas really struggle to get to any hospital and to cope with the long waits and busy clinics if they can get there. A minor injuries unit and outpatients clinics in Todmorden would hugely improve access to healthcare for these people and therefore improve their independence and quality of life. This expensive, purpose-built centre is woefully underused at present. While we are pleased that its radiography facilities have reopened, we remain concerned that the patients in the Upper Calder Valley that we represent do not enjoy the same level of access to urgent treatment facilities as those living in other parts of Calderdale. We request that you include this matter in your work plan for the coming year, and that's signed by Barry Minear, Chair of Todmorden Group Practice PPG, and Richard Woodcock, Chair of Hebden Bridge Group Practice PPG.
Okay, thank you. I think there might be a couple of questions that we'll take under item 7 on that. Okay. We also have a deputation from Jenny Shepherd, and Yolanda, you're going to read that.
This deputation relates to the H&E Huddersfield Royal Infirmary accident and emergency opening. Physician associates are non-medical 2-year trained postgraduates. The role has been introduced into the NHS from the USA over the last decade in an apparent effort to cut NHS costs and quickly shore up the dwindling numbers of doctors as burnout drives them out of the NHS. The role is proving increasingly contentious. As of February 2024, CHFT employed 36 physician associates who had illegally prescribed opiates to patients on at least 22 occasions, according to the Daily Telegraph piece. Physician associates have no legal right to prescribe drugs. The Trust said the prescriptions were the result of an IT blunder that gave physician associates access to the electronic prescribing system for 7 months. IT blunder or no, shouldn't the physicians associates have known the limits of their job description? Some of the Calderdale and Huddersfield hospitals' physician associates are employed in the new HRI A&E, according to information provided at the open day back in October 2023. Anna Basford told me, the Huddersfield Emergency Department will be staffed by consultants, doctors and nurses qualified in emergency medicine. Physician associates are a valuable addition to the healthcare team and increase access to quality care for patients and service users. They act in a generalist role, helping to meet the healthcare team's workload and to add the skill mix within the team. However, at the time, the Royal College of Emergency Medicine had not made any decisions about the future role of physician associates in emergency medicine, and at its September 2023 executive meeting had agreed to form a short-life working group to establish what could be the role of emergency medicine physician associates, as well as to work out their training issues. Please will the JOSC ask the Calderdale and Huddersfield Foundation Trust why it went ahead and employed physician associates in its emergency departments before the Royal College of Emergency Medicine had decided what their role and training should be. What CHFT's position is now on employing any more physician associates in its emergency departments after the 7th of June announcement by the Royal College of Emergency Medicine that it does not currently support the expansion of physician associate workforce in emergency medicine, due to concerns about patient safety, the need to prioritise the training and retention of all emergency doctors and credentialed advanced clinical practitioners and the capacity of emergency medicine educators to train and adequately supervise PAs. How CHFT is responding to the Royal College of Emergency Medicine's updated position on the current emergency medicine physician associates workforce, which includes rotas, PAs should be considered a distinct workforce group and should not be used to replace emergency doctors and ACPs. Patient safety. The scope of practice of PAs in the emergency medicine workforce must be defined, safe and effective. Supervised practice. PAs working in emergency departments must always cooperate under the safe supervision of an emergency medicine consultant, associate specialist or specialist doctor according to local policy. Public awareness. PAs must be clearly identifiable and identify themselves as a PA to members of the public and other clinicians.
Thank you. I think if you could, in your presentation, if you could address some of those points, I think as well, that would be helpful to the committee. Okay. Right. We have no other deputations. So we'll move to item 7, update on the opening of the A&E at Huddersfield Royal Infirmary. If those attending for this item could introduce themselves first, please. We do have some new members of the committee, so if you could just remember that in your presentation, that we do have some new councillors on this committee this time. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm Dr. Mark Davis. I'm a consultant in emergency medicine and a clinical lead for reconfiguration at Calderdale and Huddersfield Trust. I think I sent through some slides.
Hi there, I'm Fran Hewitt. I'm the Assistant Director of Transformation and Partnerships, and I'm the Programme Manager for Reconfiguration.
Okay, so I've been asked to give an update on the opening of the new A&E at HRI. So just to remind councillors that this is part of a vision that we have for our future care of patients across Calderdale and Kirklees. Just moving on to the next slide, please. So as well as building the new A&E at Huddersfield, there's a plan to invest in the existing buildings on the Huddersfield site, as well as new clinical building over at Calderdale, which will include additional wards, a new A&E, a children's A&E, and 2 new theatres within the building. So this is almost the start of what we're planning to do. Just go on to the next slide, please. So the A&E at Huddersfield opened in the early hours of the 22nd of May. The first patient came in at just after 10 past midnight, and by 9:30 this morning we'd seen just over 8,500 patients through that facility. And I just, again, a reminder that this is almost the start of the end of a very long journey. We've been working on this programme now for a very long time. And Councillor Smage has been with us for the vast majority of the way. So, yeah, the decision to change the way we deliver care started back in 2013, and since then we've gone through a programme of defining the model of care, along with the public consultation and reviews of that model of care, which is where the new A&E from Huddersfield came from. So I think it's a testimony to the impact that the public can make into these plans that we've made. So the new A&E is opened just a couple of weeks ago, but again, this is the start of what's to come. So there's another big chapter still waiting to be delivered. Just moving on to the next slide, please. Just to remind colleagues of what we were aiming to do when we started to design the new A&E at Huddersfield, and this was based on feedback from patients, the public, staff and stakeholders about what we wanted to gain, and that was really to offer a healing environment that was therapeutic just in its very nature, and provide calm and light as much as possible, to be inclusive, to support the needs of diverse patients, maintaining privacy and dignity while at the same time enabling social interaction. And a large number of the decisions that were made during the design were based very much on those principles. So some of the things that we did based on what we were asked to deliver, so we were asked to deliver plenty of ambulance parking spaces, and we worked with colleagues in the Yorkshire Ambulance Service around projected numbers of ambulances and how many parking spaces they would need. So that's been delivered. and asked for a generous reception area with visibility of the waiting room to maintain patient safety in that area. And that's exactly what we've delivered with plenty of natural light coming in and a highly visible reception area for patients to see and for staff to look out of. There was a need to combine the assessment of walk-in patients and ambulance patients to make sure that they both had the same offer and allowed for efficiencies of staffing. So the joint assessment area delivers that promise. And the move from couch-centred care into chair-centred care with the aim of home first rather than a plan to come into hospital has been delivered by the couch-centric treatment lounge, which is used on a daily basis to full capacity. And then the other bit which does make a significant difference to the children and carers of those children who present is the dedicated children's area, which provides a safe environment that is audiovisually separate from adults in the department and meets all the needs of the Royal College of Children and Public and Paediatric Medicine requirements. Just going on, since we've opened, we've asked a number of our colleagues what they think about the facility. And Emmy here, one of our sisters, she says it's a lovely space to work in, and that because of the size and it's much less oppressive than the existing A&E. So people feel that they've got a bit more freedom to work and to make their own decisions. So it improves empowerment for those staff as well, just because they don't feel like they're being pressurised based on the space capacity that we had previously. And then Ilana, one of our advanced nurse practitioners, she says it's an uplifting place to work, and the environment makes a big difference. There have been some bedding in issues. It's a big change for a lot of our staff, moving from a department that, albeit has its downfalls, they were familiar with, and moving to a new department. But I think staff are now getting used to the new department and are starting to adapt to the new ways of working that it enables. And then moving on, a couple of patients. So Lindsay brought in her son Caleb and was very appreciative of the children's area. Again, a safe place for a child to play while they're waiting and the distraction activities there. And then finally, Mark, who came in with his shoulder injuries, he describes it going from a Victorian environment to a modern environment, which is far better than we had before. There is a video available online if anybody wants to have a look on our YouTube channel that'll give you a tour of the department. And then finally there's just one more slide just to remind councillors again that as well as the healthcare benefits, the social benefit to the area that this has provided, over 900 hours of training in CPD, over 5,000 apprenticeship hours, work placements, and a significant amount of the spend with local businesses. So this has got benefits for Huddersfield and Kirklees beyond just a new healthcare facility. That's it from my slides perspective, just picking up on some of the comments around particularly the physicians' associates. We recognise that the GMC and the Royal College of Emergency Medicine have issued guidance now on the use of physicians' associates. And as an organisation and a department, we're reviewing the role of those individuals within our department. We're reviewing when they work, who they work alongside, and the patient groups that they see, so that we will provide a workforce which meets the requirements of both the GMC and the Royal College of Emergency Medicine.
Just before I open it up for questions, can we just Todmorden Health Centre? So, just as a reminder, in the original recommendations from the Joint Health Committee, albeit in 2016, we did say about Todmorden Health Centre and Home Valley Memorial Hospital, recommending that the facilities are maximised. And so I just wondered if you are able to address any of the points that were raised in the deputation about a minor injuries unit at Todmorden. Is that yourselves?
Yeah, so the decision to provide a minor injury service at Todmorden or any other facility outside of our estate would be for the ICB to commission. And as Mr Brown indicated in his communication back to the chairs of the patient groups at Todmorden and Hebden Bridge practices, at present that decision is not being supported from a financial and a feasibility perspective in order to maintain safety. But it will be a decision for the ICB rather than from the acute trust.
It wouldn't be CHFT that would put proposals to the ICB about that. It would be the Calderdale ICB that would.
Yes, it will be a decision for the ICB. The ICB has discussed it and have currently are at the decision that it's not a proposal that they plan to pursue at present.
Right, okay. So when they discussed it, just so that I understand, because it is complicated, isn't it? When the Integrated Care Board at West Yorkshire level, presumably at a West Yorkshire level or a Calderdale level presumably, when they discussed it, were they discussing proposals that came from a trust or anywhere else, or were they discussing proposals that came from themselves? Do we know?
I can't tell you specifically. It'll have either have come from those practices. The patient groups of those practices are able to communicate directly to the ICB. What we can't do as an organisation is just decide to set up a service there if the ICB is not commissioning it.
Appreciate that. Okay, Councillor Barnes, I'll open it for questions.
Chair, is it on that point, can I just flag a note to our scrutiny officer to pick that up with our own adult health scrutiny board at a later date, and we can pick that up and take that forward and bring anything back to this committee if so appropriate. Are you okay with that?
Yeah, I was involved in setting up outreach services at Todmorden Health Centre back in 1995. At that time, things were slightly different. We had a surplus of staff and nowhere for them, no facilities for them to work from in the hospital because it was too small. So making use of facilities in the community made absolute sense for best use of the staff. Things have changed a bit since then, in that for many specialties, the difficulty is lack of staff and needing to get the greatest value from their time. Now, that's not to downplay the value of time to our patients. One of the reasons that we looked at Todmorden for eye clinics was because a quarter of the patients were children who came with parents in tow and often siblings in tow. And if you were coming from Walsden to the hospital in Halifax, it required 3 buses each way, which was a major undertaking. I'm not sure how the staffing aspect, providing outreach outpatient clinics is staff heavy, staff intensive, and I'm not sure how the sums would add up now. But when Todmorden Health Centre was built as a Darcy Centre, to the best of my knowledge, it was split between the trust having ownership of the top floor and the clinical commissioning group having ownership of the lower floor. Is that still the case? Because obviously, you know, if it is trust premises to an extent, then that should have some influence on who actually takes decisions.
I couldn't tell you exactly who owns which bit of the building. I do know that we are delivering some services out of that building. So there is X-ray being used 3 days a week, and they plan to increase that as it's used more. There are orthopaedic, rheumatology and neurology clinics being held out there, mainly because they're the specialties who, other than needing an X-ray, don't need any support facilities there. So there is work going on out there at the moment, but in terms of who owns which bit, I'm afraid I'm not able to tell you that.
Okay, all right, thanks. So maybe could we ask then for some updates on Todmorden Health Centre to be looked into, please, but also as well Home Valley. We could look to see what services are being provided from Home Valley as well at this moment in time, as an update for this committee, and Calderdale can then come back to us about Todmorden. Okay, yeah, Councillor Hutchinson.
Can I just ask for a little bit more detail on the physician associates roles? You say it's being reviewed in the light of discussions that are taking place at the Royal College of Emergency Medicine. Is that actually is that review causing any practical difficulties in staffing the department, and when will it be likely to be completed?
So the biggest issue which caused to date is a lot of anxiety within that group of individuals, and we obviously have a duty, and it's important that we take care of their well-being as well. What we are doing is removing them from night shifts when there's no consultants on duty. That said, we are soon moving to a rota system where there will be consultants on duty overnight at Huddersfield, in which case the PAs will continue to work under direct supervision, and we're changing the way in which they're supervised so that every patient they see is reviewed by a consultant, and there are specific groups of patients who they won't see directly and will only see with supervision. And certainly in terms of the prescribing of morphine, I'm not aware that that's been an issue in our department, in the emergency department, and certainly our physician associations don't prescribe anything.
Those sound very, very sensible measures to be taken. We had the benefit of a guided tour around the new A&E department before it opened, and it looked really well designed and very well thought through how the design had been set up. But as military people say, very few plans survive first contact with the enemy. I just wondered whether there'd been any changes that you'd had to make now that it's open for public use.
Like I said, there's been a bedding in and a getting used to new ways of working. I think we haven't changed anything significantly yet. That said, we've got our 30-day review planned on Thursday. We were keen not to make knee-jerk decisions from the outset, and there was nothing that was critical that we needed to change, but we'll be having a full review of how it's gone over the last month and how we need to tweak things. And then there will be work then going ahead as how we change the way that we work to maximise the benefits that the building enables. I think it's been a big change to start with, and there's a limit to how much you can expect a big group of staff to change where they're working and how they work. But we're now in a position, I think, we can start moving that forward so we start to maximise the benefits.
Councillor Barnes.
First, typical of a consultant to view patients as the enemy. Or should I say an ex-consultant to view patients as the enemy. I think I'd like a quick comment, and then I've got a specific question, is that I think there's always been some concern about the integration and part of how the plans for the reconfigurations are based is that the integration across the other services around both areas and the ICBs and the way in which things are structured. And I think, from some of the agenda items today, we are seeing some potential cracks or holes that we really, that need to be looked at and filled in. But that's obviously for ongoing. In terms of specific and going to the A&E, can I ask, there are two aspects of the budget. Obviously, there's the capital budget in terms of the spend on building it. I think we can all read the comments from the last minutes as to why there was a delay or the rationale behind or the reason for the delay. How has that impacted upon the capital budget in terms of did we Did we come in within budget, and was there any, and what was the capital impact upon that delay? But the second part is, what was the revenue impact on the trust on that delay? Because obviously the trust must have built into its financial plans opening the A&E early, and one assumes the A&E would be operating a much more operationally efficient model than the old A&E. And there's somebody born in the 1960s, which I think was when the A&E was originally built. It's nice to be felt Victorian myself, but we'll move on from that one. So what has been the impact on the budgets, both capital budgets and the ongoing revenue budgets? Because we obviously know the pressures that the trust has been under revenue based.
So in terms of capital, the delay had no impact on capital. All the costs of the remedial works that were undertaken are borne by the contractor, not by us as a trust. So we haven't that isn't increased the capital budget at all. In terms of revenue, there is a small amount of revenue for people like me and my colleagues in the estates team linking with the contractors over that period, but that's not significant. And in terms of revenue for the running of the new A&E compared to the old A&E, the vast majority of our revenue costs are staff, and the staffing costs of this A&E are exactly the same as the staffing costs of the old A&E. There's no uplift in staff because of the new building, so there's very little impact there. What we won't have seen is the other benefit realisations, for example, the better patient experience, the better infection control benefits, and sort of what we'd expect to see improved staff morale. So those benefits, which are much softer and much harder to measure, those will have been delayed by 6 months inevitably. They must have been. But it's difficult to quantify that in terms of cost. What we have seen, despite not opening, is an increase in staffing, so recruitment. Recruitment on the basis of we've built it, even though we haven't necessarily opened it, so we've managed to recruit a couple of consultants because there's now evidence of investment in emergency care in Huddersfield and Halifax.
They sound like Field of Dreams. We built it and they will come. I'm revealing my age here quite dramatically, folks, aren't I? Mark, your microphone's on, by the way. So in terms of actually going to the capital budget, so one presumes, therefore, we came within budget. The spend was as is. Therefore, if the contractor effectively made less profit because they had to cover the remedial costs, was there any surplus on the budget, on the budget to the spend, and what is happening to that surplus if there is?
No, there's no surplus. We've come in pretty much bang on budget, as expected.
I think while we're asking the questions about costings, etc., one of the reasons is about the financial envelope for the whole reconfiguration. So there was a part of the money was for the changes to the HRI A&E, wasn't it? And then there was money for the main reconfiguration proposals, which include changes to Calderdale Hospital. And last time you came, in March, you said that the outline business case remained with the Treasury for review and approval. So I think what we would like to know is, what is the update on that? Have you had approval for that money to be spent on the full reconfiguration? And how is the Learning Development Centre progressing?
So the Learning Development Centre is progressing well. It's still planned to open August, September this year. So that's work in progress. In terms of the approvals, I can't say I've had a definite update yet, but I can get that information for you.
What's the ban?
Will that include any update on the negotiations with the PFI partners? Because my last recollection was from a meeting last year. We were advised that that would be completed by December, and we haven't had an update on that. So could that be included within that as well, please?
Yep, we can do, yes.
And does this mean then that you're still on track for 2029?
Yes. We're currently working alongside Lang O'Rourke, who's our design and construction partner for Calderdale, on refining the designs and ensure that they will be affordable within the financial envelope that we've got. That's work in progress.
Councillor Barnes.
It's the Barnes and Smage show at the moment, isn't it? In terms of going back to the A&E, and I don't mean this from an operational medical basis, but obviously it was disappointing that the problems were identified so late in the piece. We are just about to go into a significant number of, or a number of significant redevelopments and developments across the estate. What lessons have been learnt from the ongoing project management of the A&E that are going to be taken forward into future redevelopment plans?
Yeah, and I think that's a very valid question and something that I've asked myself. So there are a number of things that we'll put in place. We'll put much tighter, not controls, but oversight of inspections that happen along the route. And who's inspecting and who's validating and who's validating and who's validating and who's validating. I think we had a number of supervisors from within the construction partner and who worked for us independently who are reviewing the situation. But I think there's times when it comes to subcontractors and subcontractors that we need to increase that level of supervision.
Can we ask then about the service reconfiguration then? Previously we had some detail about when the different service reconfigurations were being worked on. So how is transformation within the trust progressing, and how are the service reconfigurations moving forward?
So it's clear, like you described, that it's, what we're doing here is more than just building buildings. It's about transforming the way that we work. And there's a challenge to integrate that future planning and that transformation work into the business as usual. And I think over the last 12 months, all of our services have been describing their future models of care, what we've called a TOM, a target operating model for each of their services. And what we're doing now that we've got this A&E done, there's a sense of enthusiasm and almost a springboard within the organisations. Again, it's making, this is real. That 11 or 12 year journey is now really becoming real when you see buildings. So we're now working more and more to how do our operational teams now start to describe how they're going to operationalise those transformation models over the next 5 years, so that by the time we're into the building, we're ready to use it to its maximum potential. So that's work that's going on and is being overseen by our operational executive team.
Councillor Hutchinson.
One of the developments at Calderdale Royal was the development of ambulatory care adjacent to the accident and emergency department for people who were having investigations or treatment was being begun rather than being admitted to wards. Has that been built into the model at Huddersfield Royal as well, or are people being transferred from Huddersfield to Calderdale for ambulatory care at the moment?
So at the moment, we have, the term ambulatory care has been renamed same-day emergency care on the basis that you don't have to be able to walk to access it. So we run a same-day emergency care service for medicine and general surgery at Huddersfield, and there's a medical same-day emergency care centre at Calderdale currently. And they will continue to function. In the new model, once we've constructed the clinical build at Calderdale, there will be a dedicated same-day emergency care facility for medical and surgical patients on that site. So yeah, same-day emergency care is very much part of our plans.
I just got used to the term ambulatory care. Councillor Barnes.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's something that I just wanted to pick up with Mark, and it's not really a question as such. It's more the fact that you made the comment that it's now getting real. It's now getting operational. You know, I know we might not think it, but 2029 in terms of the development of this is not that far away. And there's allusion to it in the last set of minutes about the communication and bringing not just staff on board, but actually patients, residents, who are going to potentially see some significant changes in the next few years. I think it's vital, and it might be that's something we need to consider as a separate work item, that the communication plans, how this is going to be communicated into how patients will see different or have to do different things, or have to go to a different hospital than they were previously, needs to be on point massively. And I just think it's worth us having a look at that in coming forward. I'm sorry, Yolanda, I'm dumping more work on us here. This one's for us, not for Libby, though. But I think it is an important thing that we need to be addressed. And I think Councillor Hutchinson and I know the sort of work that has been done in the past with Calderdale Hospital, certain changes, the learning and development, how we engage with the local residents that will be affected by the change in building, and brought them on board, and then on board to the changes, how it's worked within various highways infrastructures. Yeah, you put yourself out there, and you might not get the answers back you like, or the feedback, but it brings the people on board with you, and it allows them to go with the journey, because this is a key journey. So I just think it is important that we bring that back, and that there is engagement from the Trust with this committee and with the adult social committees in the various councils in bringing this forward.
Yeah, I think if that's okay, I think that's an excellent suggestion. What I would suggest is, if it's okay with the committee, that myself and Councillor Hutchinson have some discussions on where they are with the transformation, and then we can hopefully bring a plan to the committee, and hopefully then we can plan, as far as scrutiny is concerned, when we would like to see the different transformation of services coming through, and those communications, etc. Because presumably it's going to be a gradual process. Once you have the facilities in place, it will be a gradual process to 2029 of changes in services. And we as a committee need to make sure that all that communication has been carried out, and that we have oversight of those changes. Okay, all right. If that's okay with everybody for that. Councillor Hutchinson.
Yeah, I think it's particularly important that current and future patients know where they're supposed to go to access the various services, and know that well in advance, and that it's put across in ways that are very, very accessible.
Also, I think you plan for outpatient appointments across the services, because there have been reconfigurations in the past, not necessarily CHFT, where promises have been made that outpatients appointments will be at each site, and when you get an appointment, you find that it's the furthest site away from you where your appointment is. So I think it's important that we also keep that in mind as well. Okay. Are there any other points on this item that anybody wishes to raise? Councillor Lawson.
Thank you. I'd like to first of all commend the Trust for the building of the new A&E unit. I went and had a look around at one of the open days, and it looked to be extremely streamlined. There were certain areas people will go to first of all, but has that actually lessened the time that patients are actually waiting? First of all, to be triaged, then to be seen by a clinician, then to have their discharge paperwork done, or to be found in a ward? Because obviously you hear horror stories of people waiting for beds, sort of 24, 48 hours. I'm not saying that is at CHFT. You hear it nationally, sort of within the news. My second question is, what type of emergency patients are you actually seeing at the moment? And obviously, as the ultimate plan is for HRI to become the planned care hospital moving forward, would that mean that emergency patients would be automatically taken to Calderdale A&E and bypassing Huddersfield? Thank you.
Okay, so in terms of performance, I think we were very nervous as an organisation that we would have a dip in performance based on the change and it being a new way of working. We haven't seen a dip in performance. Our performance is pretty much as it was before. We haven't seen all of the benefits of the new department, yes, like I said, because we haven't bedded in the new ways that we will work in that department, and that's work in progress. I think in terms of time for patients getting to a ward, there are challenges across the whole of the healthcare in the UK and beyond, and they're not all within the emergency department. And I think our performance is no different to other trusts in that moving patients to a ward is nothing like as quickly as we'd like it to be. What we haven't seen is the benefits within the emergency department that we'd expect to see as we start to bed in those new ways of working. So I think I'm saying really it's too early to say because we haven't, like I say, maximised the benefits, but we will keep an eye on it, and it's certainly something that we aim to deliver to improve certainly the emergency department element of that patient journey. In terms of the long-term plans, we currently see all patients who turn up as an emergency. If they turn up with a sore throat, cut finger, or been stabbed in the back, we'll see them in the emergency department at Huddersfield, and the ambulances will bring patients to us who they're not taking to Leeds because they're having a myocardial infarction or because of major trauma. And we have some agreements with the Yorkshire Ambulance Service that, for example, unwell children will be taken direct to Huddersfield and to Calderdale, sorry, and strokes will be taken to Calderdale from both sides of the patch. But frail elderly and people with injuries would come to Huddersfield because that's where our specialties are for those services. But generally, we see all emergencies who turn up at Huddersfield. The future model describes all blue light ambulances going direct to Calderdale because that's where the backup services to the emergency department will be. And anybody who turns up at Huddersfield, walks in and is deemed to have an acute problem that requires specialist intervention, they will be moved across to Calderdale. That's the model we described and has been that we're working towards.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can I just ask a final question then, because it moves us into the next one, which is the Yorkshire Ambulance Service modelling that we've asked for. How has the new A&E helped with turnaround times, handover times for the ambulances? And have you seen improvements in that you can take forward?
I think in terms of improvements in turnaround times, I think that would go in the same bracket as everything else. We're not maximising the benefits yet, so we haven't seen an improvement that we will expect to see in turnaround times. But we were working on that, and we're working with our colleagues in the ambulance service to deliver on that.
Okay, thank you. If there's no other points on this, then I think we've raised some points already for bringing back, but when you've done the review, would the committee like some information on how that review has gone and what changes, if any, is going to be made, etc.? Would the committee like some update on that? Yes, so we'll be in touch about how we do that. Okay, all right, thank you. So that moves us on then to the Yorkshire Ambulance Service report. And I believe we have two people from Yaz in the room, and Helen is online. So if you could introduce yourselves, please. And is there a presentation that you're going to, report that you're going to talk to us on, first of all? Who's leading on this? Is it Helen or yourselves? Yourselves, Rachel. Yeah.
Yeah, good morning everybody. I'm Rachel Gillett, Director of Partnerships and Operations for Yorkshire Ambulance Service, covering the West Yorkshire part of our footprint. And I've been with Yorkshire Ambulance Service for about 18 months now. And my colleague is...
Good morning, everyone. My name is Bash Rafiq. I'm the Area Operational Manager for Kirklees. I've been in the ambulance service 25 years.
And online we have...
Hello, good morning. My name's Helen Edwards. I'm Head of Communications and Community Engagement. Apologies I couldn't be with you in the room today, supporting Bash and Rachel.
No, that's fine. We're perfectly used to hybrid these days, so you're fine. Okay, so yourselves then is going to talk to the report first of all, yes? And then we'll come in with questions.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's fine. We did circulate a presentation. I'm not sure that it was actually as described on the agenda. It's not a modelling report, but what we clarified, I think, kind of before the meeting was that we would provide you with a general update and a refresh of some of the information that you've previously seen around our response times to the postcodes of this area. So I'm going to kick off and then I'll kind of let Bash jump in as well. I wasn't going to go through it kind of line by line because you've seen it. So just some general headlines really is one, as a service, we are now working to our new strategy, which was launched in January of this year. So we've got a 5-year strategy, which is has set out kind of a number of bold ambitions around our patients, our people, our partners, and our planet and pounds. And it kind of sets out our vision around wanting to be a provider of great care with great people and being a great partner. I think what the strategy does as well, it also kind of emphasises the 3 service lines that we provide as a service. So we have the 111 service as part of our organisation. Obviously we have the emergency service, the Blue Light 999 service, and we have planned care through our patient transport service as well. So it's very much around bringing the whole of those together and how we work as an integrated system partner to make sure that our patients who choose to contact us are receiving care from the most appropriate service. Sometimes that's through ourselves, other times that's about how we integrate and connect with other services, both in the community and out of hospital, and obviously with our acute trust providers. We've given you a flavour of our annual business plan as well, which kind of fits into those 4 bold ambitions. And again, just kind of emphasising that kind of remit around being our approach is very much a collaborative response to kind of shared challenges, and we all know that we can't work in isolation and that we must work together in an integrated way with our system partners. There's also included in there a little bit of background around some of our other services that might not be immediately obvious to colleagues in terms of some of the community first responders, which is our team of volunteers, and we kind of work with our volunteers really closely. And we have an amazing kind of group of volunteers who give us vast amounts of their time, and some of that information is provided there for you. The bit that was missing in time for us submitting was the number of community first responders that we have in the Calderdale area, but that's certainly something we can provide if that's of interest. And also just to emphasise in terms of the paramedic workforce, it is a profession that is expanding and developing. It's a relatively new profession in the grand scheme of things, and we're certainly doing our part to kind of support our staff to develop, and have introduced a number of specialist paramedic roles. And again, as the presentation shows, it's urgent care, critical care, and more recently we've introduced a specialist paramedic mental health role, and we have a number of dedicated mental health response vehicles, 4 of which in the fullness of time when that programme is fully delivered will operate from within the West Yorkshire footprint. And then there's just some examples of some of the work that we do, and Mark has alluded to the work that we've contributed, and we certainly did do some modelling to support that business case originally, and as we move forward we will be kind of revisiting that modelling to make sure that we're reflecting current and future trends of patient demand, and in particular with in line with the planned reconfigurations. And then just finally from me, just some examples there around some of the partnership working that we are undertaking currently in this area, largely around kind of making sure that our patients are getting the most appropriate care. And as I said, that's either through ourselves and responding to patients in an emergency and bringing them through to EDs, but also working with our community and primary care providers and partners to make sure that we're maximising the availability of services in the community that best meet patients' needs. And then obviously the rest of the presentation is very much data driven and highlights some of the response times by postcode. So that's as much as I wanted to say. Bash, I don't know if there's anything you want to add with respect to the data.
Thank you very much, Rachel. In regards to the ambulance service, I think the ambulance service has, over the years, has evolved. We're looking... I think from the ambulance perspective, ambulance service has evolved over the years. I know Rachel has alluded to the specialist urgent care paramedics. They're specialists where they are able to treat patients at home, try and keep patients at home with antibiotics, with different ways of working. It's not a case of everybody that dials 999 where we convey them to hospital. We're trying to mitigate that, work very closely with hospitals and GPs. We've also got critical care paramedics who will obviously deal with cardiac arrest and traumatic incidents. So we've got specialist resources in that sense. We've obviously got the helimed as well, conveying patients far further afield for specialist treatments as well. Mental health as well, which there's an increase in mental health. We've obviously got practitioners to deal with that now across Kirklees and Calderdale. I've just coming on to, I've worked very closely with Mark and his team in terms of the configuration and well done, and they've done an absolutely fantastic job. We've put out a QR code recently in terms of the experience from the ambulance service, what their experience is and how we can improve that. We're obviously waiting for the data to come back. We've sent out the staff survey, what their experience is in terms of how they've been dealt with, if there's been any delays, that kind of stuff. So we'll be more than happy to feed that back. Response, in terms of the category 1 response, we're struggling in areas like HD 7, 8 and 9, and the reason being is it's very rural, Huddersfield, further afield. We don't have ambulance stations everywhere. We've got an ambulance station at Huddersfield, we have an ambulance station at Honley, and we've also an ambulance station at Dewsbury. We've got to strategically pace our standby points, and that's something we could potentially consider going forward. But we obviously don't know where the incidents are occurring, but we do have standby points for argument's sake. We've got a standby point in Dewsbury bus station. We send out what we call rolling cover to see where the potential jobs are, but we're pretty much working to full capacity. Hospital turnarounds are really, really good. We try and aim for 15 minutes turnarounds, and I think we're doing really, really good in that sense. So we've obviously got some data which is at hand. Look at this, the average turnover for Calderdale was 11 minutes, Dewsbury was 10 minutes, even though we don't cover a lot of patients there. Most patients go to Pinderfields. Huddersfield's averaging at 17 minutes and Pinderfield's around 20 minutes. Whatever the delay is, I mean, sometimes the delay is that patients are cardiac arrest, for argument's sake, or the traumatic incidents, and there's a time delay frame in that sense. Other than that, I don't think I've anything more to add.
Okay. Does Helen want to add anything from... No? Okay. All right. So we'll open it up to questions then now. Councillor Ryler.
I was interested to read about the community first responders, and I wondered if you could tell me a little bit about their role, how it's organised as their volunteers, and how many do you have around the trusts? Thank you.
Sorry, I'll take that one if that's all right, Bash.
Yeah,
I mean, we might need to come back to you. It's not my area of expertise, and it's coordinated by colleagues in our organisation. But essentially how that works is, yes, they are volunteers. What we ask of them is to kind of commit. Helen might actually be a better place to answer. I'll go and Helen can chip in. We ask them to kind of commit a number of hours in a given period of time. When they're available and they're wishing to kind of volunteer their time, they kind of inform us, and they kind of feature on our what we call our CAD, our dispatch kind of software, so we can see that we've got community first responders available and able to respond. They predominantly kind of respond to category 1s and cardiac arrests, because we know that kind of the sooner we can start kind of work with resuscitation techniques, that then the life chances are much better, and then they're backed up by a paramedic crew or a critical care crew. The pack includes a little bit of information around Calderdale, I think, Kirklees. I can get you the Calderdale figures if that's helpful, in terms of how many we have. Yeah.
And could I just ask what sort of training they have?
They are trained. Helen, I don't know if you know more about the kind of level of training, but I'll let Helen come in.
So I have some involvement with volunteers. There are a number of different training courses they have to complete, some statutory and mandatory training. Some of them tend to take sort of more specialist roles, so they'll go for falls training, so they'll attend incidents with specialist falls equipment, but they're there to be kind of first on scene, often living within 5 miles of an incident. So part of the training that they receive clinically is how to deliver immediate life-saving treatment. Bash, I'm sure, will have experienced incidents where a community first responder is first on scene using a defibrillator or carrying out CPR. So the training they're provided enables them to deliver that first on scene emergency care.
Can I ask, your category 1 performance and category 2 performance, just to clarify, the category 1, is it within 8 minutes? On category 2, is it within 20 minutes?
So the national target for category 1 is 7 minutes as an average, and the 90th percentile within 15 minutes.
Within 15 for category 2. Right.
Sorry, no. So that's the category 1. So the average is 7 minutes, and then there's a separate target around the 90th percentile, and that's the 15 minutes. In terms of the category 2, the national target is 18 minutes as an average. However, since COVID, there has been an interim target set around 30 minutes. So currently it's 30 minutes, and currently within the West Yorkshire area, our performance is coming in just under the 30 minutes for our category 2. Category 1, it's just outside the 7 minutes, around the 8-minute mark.
Okay, thanks. Right, okay, so in my understanding, it's probably wrong, so please correct me if I'm wrong here. So an ambulance is on station at the start of shift, yes? And then get called, and then they go to whichever hospital they need to, because of the condition of the person that they're taking to hospital. So, for instance, if it's certain conditions, they go into Leeds. If it's other conditions, then they go to Pinderfields or Calderdale or Huddersfield. And therefore, you've got ambulances going in certain directions all day, and then when they come out of the hospital and they click that they're ready again to receive calls, then they can go anywhere. They don't necessarily go back to a standby position. They can then go anywhere. So one of the questions that we asked when it was the Mid-Yorkshire reconfiguration was, how does the change of ambulance on blue lights going either to Dewsbury or Pinderfields, when it changed to just going to Pinderfields, how does that affect response times for different areas in the Mid-Yorkshire patch? And I think my question would be, when you get to the change in emergency blue light ambulances for CHFT, how are you preparing to be able to meet the targets and get to people as quickly as possible when you've got ambulances that are going into Calderdale? I notice already you're talking about, in these figures, you're talking about outliers in BD11 and 19. Well, I'm declaring interest in that postcode of BD11. But I wouldn't have called them outliers because they're right, certainly BD11 is right next to Bradford. And HD 7, 8 and 9, yes, more rural areas, and certainly in Calderdale as well, more rural areas in Calderdale. So how are you going to ensure that you can meet the performance that you need to meet when the changes in CHFT occur? Because at the minute you're struggling over in Mid-Yorkshire by the looks of this. Yeah.
Yep, so what we did and what we will continue to do is we have our own internal specialist team who look at our capacity and demand profile and do some quite sophisticated modelling around our resource availability and what that will mean in terms of profile in demand and any changes in demand profiles, factor all of that through, which will give us kind of our commitment or our ability to be able to kind of meet the national standards. We also work with an external partner who are equally experienced and well experienced in kind of doing ambulance sector modelling. And I think when we did the modelling previously, we used some of their expertise along with our own internal expertise to do that modelling. So essentially it's a capacity planning modelling exercise. So we take account of our resources that we've got available to us. So that's both our fleet, our staff, and profile that against planned and future expected demand profiles. And obviously it's as scientific as we can make it given kind of historical patterns, and we do attempt to kind of make some forecasting assumptions around that. So that is the kind of process that we will go through.
So my next question then is, because it is about capacity and vehicles, etc., people, vehicles, and that, it's going to take a little while for you to model that, and if you need to increase capacity, for that to be put in place. So when in this process will you be able to say to us, yes, this is the model that we are going to be following, and this is the capacity that we are going to need, and these are what this is what we're aiming to achieve before there are changes at CHFT overall?
So what we've just recently done is we've just done a roster review across Kirklees, which is Dewsbury, Huddersfield and Honley. We're constantly looking at demand profiles because it's constantly changing. So we look at our data where we need to make changes, i.e. for argument's sake, shift changes. We've had a recent influx of new vehicles in Huddersfield, Dewsbury and Honley. So we're always looking at our data. We have a department called BI that constantly, all the jobs that we receive, we constantly look at them, see where we need to be. Again, as I mentioned earlier on, in regards to our standby points, do we need to send resources elsewhere or rolling cover just to cover that specific area? You mentioned your first questions in terms of when we receive a 999 call, whatever the nearest resource is automatically allocated to that, and whichever the nearest hospital is in terms of if they can meet their, if they can accommodate their condition, then we will obviously convey the patient there. It's Yorkshire Ambulance Service, so there is a tendency for crews to drift out. So it's not a case of where we ring fence just for Huddersfield crews to remain at Huddersfield. If they get a job in Bradford, they could potentially go to Airedale and other areas, but they will eventually return back to their station for the meal break. I hope that answers the question.
And I can come in just on the when will we know. So in terms of that modelling, we are going to refresh that in the next 18 months to 2 years. And then again, we'll be led by colleagues at CHFT in terms of their timescales. And again, we'll just keep that under constant review and make sure that we're feeding that information both into the business case, but also into West Yorkshire Integrated Care Board as our lead commissioner in terms of any increase resources that will require for us in order to meet our response times.
Yeah, I think the model that we did previously, and I think we presented it here, was anticipating for 2 crewed ambulances in addition to the current. But it's a work in progress because that was 2 or 3 years ago and we've got another 5 years to go. So I think, like Rachel said, this is all about remodelling and remodelling. And we're 5 years away. We're not at a point where we need to start recruiting yet, but we will keep monitoring that.
Can I just also add that we're recruiting additional resources for the inter-facility transfers, Mark. We're at that stage now and we're doing that, and we're going to hopefully have crews available at Huddersfield ambulance stations for the transfer from Huddersfield to Calderdale.
Yeah, so, I mean, on that point, I do recall that the modelling had shown quite a large number of inter-hospital transfers when the scope of the accident emergency or the emergency department at Huddersfield was much less than what it is now. So presumably there will need to be a revision of those figures in the light of current experience.
Sorry. Yeah, absolutely. I think continual revision is what we'll be doing, really, monitoring almost on a yearly or every 2 yearly cycle, up until the point that we need to start putting definite plans in place.
Paramedics are becoming increasingly valuable in terms of people recognising their ability to carry out clinical assessments and make timely clinical decisions as well. So I know they're being recruited to do home visits in primary care, manning NHS 111 and various others. How is the retention and recruitment of paramedics for the Yorkshire Ambulance Service actually going? Is it healthy or is it tenuous at the moment? I know that I recall a few years back people were saying, well, it can actually be extremely stressful manning the blue light ambulances constantly, so suggesting that there's some benefit in rotating staff through the more stressful areas to the less stressful areas, so you keep them within the workforce but reduce the chance that they'll burn out. I was wondering if any of that was going ahead in the Yorkshire Ambulance Service.
Yes, it is, and you're absolutely right. In terms of just going back to the first point around recruitment and retention of paramedics, recruitment and retention isn't a problem, particularly for us in West Yorkshire. We've got a really good supply through the local universities of Huddersfield and Bradford, and we've also got kind of neighbouring universities over in Sheffield. As an organisation, we do less well in our Humber and North Yorkshire areas, and that's largely to do with the kind of the university profile in that part of the area. We are, and in order to address some of that, we've also kind of looked to kind of international recruitment. What we are constrained by is our vehicles. So we have a limited number of vehicles. So in terms of that pipeline, it's a pipeline planned to meet the number of vehicles that we've got available to us. So we haven't really got any concerns around the paramedic workforce. It is a constant kind of supply chain, and we constantly kind of build those relationships with our local universities so that we kind of grow the skill set within the area and maintain it in the area as well. In terms of that role development, yes, you're absolutely right. Again, particularly with the additional roles in primary care, we do have a rotational role. That is our specialist paramedics in urgent care. So they do a set time within general practice and then they return to us. And what we're finding, and they also rotate into our call centre and man what we call the clinical desk. So they're kind of doing some clinical triage over the telephone with some patients or doing some assessment to determine which resource is best for that patient as well. So we have got that ongoing. And as an organisation, as part of our kind of 5-year strategy, we're very much in that space of wanting to develop, retain and avoid, as you described, that burnout, and making sure that we keep our staff and make sure that we're the employer of opportunity, because we can't be an employer of choice, because actually we've got a bit of a captive audience in that we cover the whole of Yorkshire and Humber, but what we do want to be able to do is actually be an employer that creates those opportunities and the different roles. So again, whilst we've got some of that in existence, we're also kind of developing kind of programmes of work where we want to do more of that to make sure that we are supporting our staff, supporting the health and well-being of our staff and retaining them in the service.
Chair, may I just ask for a little bit more information about the mental health responders, which sounds a really interesting development. I was wondering whether you had... I should imagine that there are certain times of the week, certain times of the day when there is a greater demand on their services than others. I was wondering whether you were coming to a view as to what capacity you needed within the mental health response service aspects of your service, given that there's been a desire for the police to be less involved in mental health crises and other services, and we know that A&E departments are not necessarily the best place for people undergoing crisis. So I just wondered how that was developing and your thoughts on development over the coming year or two.
Yeah, sure. I'm really happy to answer that question. The specialist paramedics mental health, so the model that we are looking to implement over the course of the next 2 years is to employ 30 specialist paramedics in mental health. We've currently got 5 in post. We've just recruited another 15 who will start their education programme in September. And so that will mean that they go through some enhanced education programmes with Sheffield University. There will be 9 mental health response vehicles across the Yorkshire and Humber patch, 4 of which will be based in West Yorkshire. We've currently got 1 operational in Wakefield, we've got 1 operational in Bradford. The next 2, one will be based in Halifax and the 4th one will be in the Leeds area. So again, and we don't, as Ash was saying it earlier, although I've kind of just pinned them to a kind of specific station, they will be they are mobile and they will be kind of utilising their kind of mobility in the sense of being able to respond. The operational hours of the mental health response vehicle is, again, as you've alluded to, targeted at the times when we know that we kind of get more mental health demand. So it tends to be kind of more of a twilight kind of shift, so kind of working in the late evenings through the early hours of the morning in order to respond to those patients.
Thank you, Chair. A quick question, then I've got another point, but I'll come on that point. You mentioned you're recruiting to fill the existing fleet. What plans are there in terms of increasing the fleet? Yeah, so
we have a fleet plan that is an expanding fleet plan, and it also builds in an element of us keeping our vehicles to a level of age. So we're kind of disposing of the older vehicles and kind of refreshing them with the newer vehicles. By the end of this financial year, I think our fleet will have increased up to 512. So we're currently taking new vehicles. They're kind of arriving currently, and we've got a programme throughout the remainder of this year that will kind of give us, by the end of this financial year, a total fleet of 512, and again I'll let Helen correct me if I've got that number wrong, and then obviously going forward we've got that kind of rolling plan to kind of continue to bring new vehicles in and release our older vehicles so that we can kind of maintain their time on the road.
So your recruitment will meet, your current recruitment plans will meet the 512, okay. Is that 512 where we're sitting at, or is the plans to increase that even more over the next 4 or 5 years?
I don't, so I'd need to come back to you with the sort of growth beyond this financial year, if that's I mean, it's largely dependent on our capital funding and our ability to be able to kind of recruit, our vehicles come through our capital funds rather than our kind of revenue funding.
In terms of the workforce, often I've been involved in reorganisations and restructures all my life, it seems. The workforce are often some of the last people involved in the process. And I've often seen so many assumptions about the workforce, about retention rates, and also recruitment rates, and the time it takes to recruit, which are woefully inadequate. You know, and there's a massive difference, particularly in terms of recruiting someone who is already trained to someone who you need to train up, or you need to go through that process. How engaged are you with the workforce in bringing the workforce on board? Councillor Hutchinson related to mental health, but it's also the mental health of your workforce and the health of the workforce going forward as the demands increase. How engaged are we in terms of your discussions with the workforce in regard to the changes and development over the next few years?
Thank you. So a couple of things just to say on that one. One, just a little bit of extra information in terms of our paramedic pipeline. So we have the universities. We also have our own internal academy. So we have the YAS Academy. And we also have an apprenticeship programme, so we're able to recruit ambulance support workers who are basically on a trajectory to become qualified paramedics. It takes slightly longer than it would do if they went through the degree university route, but we've actually got a really strong pipeline again through that route, and that allows them to kind of build up their experience and their qualifications over a number of years, on average around 5 to 6 years it will take them, as opposed to kind of a 3 or 4 year degree programme. In terms of engagement of the workforce, what I will say is you will have seen kind of the culture in the ambulance services and many public sector organisations is not great. We recognise there's been a recent published document looking at the culture. We have a cultural kind of improvement programme which we call YAS Together, and again it was kind of referenced on the plan on a page around our strategy. So we've got a programme of work over the course of the next few years, and again aligned to our strategy around how we're implementing kind of new methods, new ways of engaging with our staff, but also kind of providing them with the opportunity to develop as both leaders and professionally within their clinical field. So that is work in progress, and it's certainly something that we're keen to do. We kind of get the staff survey as well, which is a kind of national kind of survey. So we look very closely at kind of the feedback that we're getting from our staff. In West Yorkshire, our area leadership team have recently had some time set aside to kind of look at the results from that, and again have put a specific action plan in place that's covering 4 priority themes. One is around looking after the health and well-being, one is around reward and recognition, one is around the visibility of our leaders, and I forgot the 4th one, which I always do. I've remembered one that I normally forget. But yeah, so I think just in answer to your question, that is definitely work in progress. There's definitely more that we can do, and Bash alluded to that engagement with the workforce. So again, with colleagues at CHFT, once we opened the unit, or once the new ED was opened, Bash has kind of set up a QR code so that staff can quite quickly kind of scan the QR code and kind of give us some immediate feedback in terms of their experience of kind of working with colleagues and some of those teething problems that Mark alluded to, so that we can continuously improve their experience. But again, things like that, we want to do more of that as an organisation going forward.
Can I ask then, we've got handover times then obviously up to March, and we can understand why the figures are up to March, but how has the opening of the new emergency department in HRI, how has that improved your ability to have a turnaround and handover quicker?
Yeah, and as Mark mentioned earlier, at Huddersfield, the average handover time was around 20 minutes, kind of throughout last year, particularly from October onwards. There was a kind of 2-week period, kind of just after the opening of the unit, where there was some kind of operational challenges which we expected. We'd kind of planned for that. We'd put additional kind of team leaders. That was around sort of staff familiarisation, getting used to the new operating processes within the new department. But we have started to see that come down. It's about where it was before now. So again, we've not kind of seen an improvement based on the historical position, but we're back on track with where it was previously. So we've not got that worsened position.
Are there any more questions for the ambulance service? No. So I think we will programme you to come in again when to talk about the modelling for the reconfiguration, because we need to look at that in some detail. Okay, all right. So maybe you can guide us on when that would be best to come in. All right. Thank you so much. We will just take a 2-minute pause in the meeting for our maternity colleagues to come in for the next item. So we will pause there, please. Good afternoon, good morning rather, jumping ahead of myself there. So now we're on item 9, reopening of the Bronte unit at Dewsbury District Hospital, and we also, would like to speak about what's happening as a result of that over in Huddersfield. So we've got Anne-Marie online. Thank you very much for coming in. So you're going to give us an update then?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, and thank you for inviting us to come back to talk about Bronte Birth Centre. I know Talib Yassin, Chief Nursing Officer, is going to be joining me, and I have with me one of my colleagues, Sarah Brennan, who is Deputy Head of Midwifery and will have some responsibilities for the birth centre going forwards. So, by way of briefing, Bronte Birth Centre reopened as planned on the 1st of April and has consistently delivered services since that time. We've had a great number of women have used the birth centre. So we've had over the last 2 months, so from the 1st of April to the 31st of May, 68 admissions, and they've converted to 19 births. And we have sent you some birth data that I hope that you'll find helpful and interesting. There were a number of questions that you'd asked us. We've sent a briefing presentation that we've tried to address those questions in. So Yolanda, I'm on page 3 in terms of the birth data.
Are we on the right slide there for you, yeah?
You are, yeah, absolutely, thank you. I think the next slide will be important and interesting to you in terms of some of the questions that you asked us, which were about what happened when women transferred and why were women transferred from Bronte Birth Centre. All transfers are reviewed, and the clinical review suggests that calls to transfer were made at good times and women and babies were kept safe through this process. And you can see at the bottom of this slide the average time for ambulance responses, and this is within the timeframes that we'd hope, really. So average time for the ambulance to arrive at Bronte Birth Centre from being called was 10 minutes, and with a range of 2 to 17 minutes. Average journey time 21 minutes and a range of 17 to 33 minutes. And from a total time from a decision being made to transfer a woman to a woman arriving on the labour ward at Pinderfields, the longest period of time was 55 minutes. So I know this was something that we had been concerned about and we've discussed previously in this forum, but at the moment the transfer data that we have is suggesting that we've got safe transfer arrangements. If you could move to the next slide, please. So there's a little bit more detail there about reasons for transfer during labour particularly, and what happened to those women who were transferred. So we transferred 7 women while they were in labour, and of those you can see 3 went on and had an assisted birth and 4 women had an unassisted birth. And all of the outcomes were safe for that cohort of women, whether they had an assisted or an unassisted vaginal birth. In terms of incidents, we haven't had any clinical incidents in the birth centre, and we haven't had any complaints from any women who've used the birth centre service. We will commence friends and family test reporting from June, so we'll be able to report on that in the next quarter. We had some conversations about staffing model, and we reopened with a model of 1 midwife and 1 maternity support worker with an on-call community midwife who was called in when women came in who were in labour. It is still a new way of working for community staff. It is still being evaluated, but at the moment, the bottom line is there isn't enough activity at present to justify additional dedicated midwives. But we will continue to review and we will continue to closely audit staffing and staffing models. I've put a further link there if there's any questions that anybody would like to ask. Michaela Little would be your contact from this group.
Okay, thank you. So I'll open it up for questions for the panel. So do we have any questions that anybody wishes to ask? Yes.
Hello. I would like to ask a question about the workforce and how stable the workforce is, or maybe how fragile the workforce is in terms of recruitment, retention, and students dropping out from university, so not finishing their course then, because I know that this has been an issue in relation to opening new areas for women to go. Thank you.
Can I check, are you referring to Bronte Birth Centre?
Yes.
Or the broader midwifery workforce?
I would say Bronte, yes.
Yeah, okay. So our workforce would be around about 6 whole-time midwives in Bronte Birth Centre, and we have recruited an established team of 6. And then we've also recruited another few midwives, so that if any of those midwives were absent from work or off sick, we've got more midwives in the workforce essentially than the minimum workforce requirements. If we look across the broader midwifery workforce, we've continued with a really strong position of recruitment, and we have very, very minimal vacancies, so less than 1 whole-time equivalent vacancy at the moment.
So can you outline what work is happening with CHFT then? Because you're working in partnership together, aren't you, on this? So how are you, last time you said you would be looking at data and monitoring, etc., to see if there was a demand to be able to have a birthing centre in Huddersfield again, and whether there were staffing levels that CHFT were able to achieve. So how is those discussions going, please?
Yeah, so whilst we are working in partnership,
yes, yeah.
Thank you. Sorry, I think there's a little bit of a lag. Whilst we are working in partnership, I don't have a report from CHFT that gives definitive detail. The headlines are that their recruitment plans are continuing as planned, and when we look at the local maternity and neonatal system projected position, that reflects the work that CHFT have been doing in terms of recruitment. So I can't give any information about CHFT plans to open a birth centre at Huddersfield. What I can say is we have had meetings in Bronte Birth Centre where the Huddersfield team have met with us. We've been able to show them the estate and the environment, and as agreed, once we get to the end of the first quarter, we will start publicising the birth centre much more broadly than we have done up to date.
Thank you. So then we will see if there is a demand from across Kirklees once you're publicising it more widely. Yes. Yeah. And how that then translates into the demand going into Calderdale as well. Yes. Yeah. Okay. Are there any other questions, Councillor Barnes?
Thank you, Chair. In terms of the transfers, I mean, it's good news that obviously the reviews came up and they were clinically the right decision, and everything looks to be, the babies were born and mothers and babies, one assumes, would have done well. But were any lessons learnt from that? And how are you constantly reviewing those and feeding back those lessons?
Thank you, Councillor. I think that's a good question, in that what we know from confidential inquiries and other inquiries into maternity services is that a failure to continuously risk assess created situations where women and or babies were, their safety could have been compromised. So I can tell you that we review every case of every woman who wants to birth at the birth centre before she comes to birth at the birth centre. There's a very active process around women choosing to birth there and the risk assessments that are made. Throughout labour, we continuously risk assess, and at the end of the pregnancy period, we again will go back and audit that those risk assessments have taken place, that they are appropriate. So at the moment, in terms of learning, I'm going to give you a null response. There isn't anything that, any case where we've thought we should have transferred earlier or we should have transferred later. When we've reviewed the cases, the team have worked in line with best practice guidance and evidence-based care. So I don't have anything to report in terms of lessons learned. I suppose if you were really pushing me, the most important thing I would say is the work that we did with Yaz before we reopened has meant that we've got really good communications and relationships with Yaz and a really clear understanding of how to make a call in such a way that Yaz understand the degree of urgency. So we've not had any cases where we've been waiting a prolonged time, for example, for a transfer.
Yeah, thank you for that. It's good news, and I'm not you know, and it's good news that you're constantly doing it. And yes, it's good news that if lessons are learnt, they're going to be brought in. So thank you very much for that.
Are there any other questions anybody would like to ask? Councillor Hutchinson.
Thank you, Chair. I know it's early days and case numbers are low at the moment, but has there been any knock-on impact one way or another with the workload and workflow at Pinderfields from the reopening of the Bronte Birth Centre?
No, I think numbers are too small at the moment in terms of the number of births that we've had for the first couple of months to really feel a difference. In terms of Bronte Birth Centre, what we have seen is an increase in the number of women accessing Pinderfields Birth Centre. And whether it's that we are re-energising conversations around choice of place of birth, and so more women are choosing to birth at Pinderfields Birth Centre, is a plausible explanation for that. So we haven't seen, as a consequence of Bronte opening, much difference in terms of workflow. The change has been the number of women who have chosen to birth at Pinderfields Birth Centre.
And can I ask, obviously the experience of women and families is important, but in terms of the experience of the staff that are working at the Bronte Birth Centre, what their impressions are of it as a place to actually work. Has there been any feedback from them?
There's two groups of staff who work in the birth centre. There's the core birth centre team, so the midwives who are rostered to work there on rostered shifts every day, and their feedback's been incredibly positive. The other group of staff are the community midwives who are on call and who come in when women are in labour. Their feedback has been more mixed because we've had to change some of their ways of working in community to enable them to respond to the birth centre calls. So overridingly, it's been balanced feedback. It's not all been positive. Some of it is about making some tweaks or some changes to the way that they're working and the modelling community. But we're still very, very early in the opening process, and people are getting to grips with a new place of work. So the feedback that we've had has not been that they've been concerned about coming into the birth centre from a safety or care delivery point of view. The feedback has been about how can we make sure that we can manage all of the competing demands on our time.
Thank you.
Are there any other points? No? Okay. Thank you for your time, and we'll be in touch about coming back with that more detailed information for yourselves and CHFT when we get past the 6 months. Okay, yeah. All right, thank you ever so much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye. For the committee then, the next item is next steps. I think we've already talked about a few things that we want to bring back. So is there anything else that has been on today's agenda that you think we might want to bring back at all that we haven't discussed? No? Okay. So Councillor Hutchinson and myself will have some discussions with officers as to when is appropriate to bring things in with CHFT, and then we'll schedule some meetings accordingly. Okay. Thank you ever so much for your time this morning. That concludes the meeting. Thank you.